Has your child ever broken something? And what are the consequences for that? Did they replace it? Today, we're going to talk about restitution, another disciplinary method in our toolbox. Stay tuned.
You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Welcome back. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to talk about restitution, our children, and what do they do when they do something that breaks somebody else's property? How do we even deal with that? Another piece of our disciplinary toolbox that we're going to talk about today. So before we get started, please subscribe here. It helps us to get the message out. We really want to reach as many families as possible for Jesus Christ. And we also have Bible studies at marriagemaniaministry.com. We have the covering, the role of a biblical husband, and the helper, the role of a biblical wife. These two Bible studies are so helpful to understand the biblical roles in marriage and how God designed marriage to be. So check those out at marriagemaniaministry.com. There are other resources out there as well and some freebies that you can check out at marriagemaniaministry.com. Okay, Michael, today we're going to talk about restitution. How do we discipline our children in this restitution technique?
Yes, and to put it into context, we're talking about a continuum of disciplinary techniques for correction that range from the least intense to the most intense, from your praise, presence, words, to redirecting behavior, to timeouts and spankings, and the gain and loss of privileges, natural consequences. And today, we're talking about restitution and other unique disciplinary methods as well. And, restitution can be that kind of, like I said, it's kind of unique. It's thinking out of the box sometimes. It's in that category. But when you think of restitution, what do you think of?
Restoring something, right? Like I break something and I've got to quickly try to figure out how to restore it, buy a new one, or fix it as much as I possibly can.
Yes, and this can be a powerful disciplinary tool. And, if, like you said, if you break somebody's window, either on purpose or your negligence, you're paying for that window out of your own money and apologize and such. And if you have no money and I have to pay for it as a parent, you're doing extra chores to pay me back. If someone is harmed by your actions, God expects you to restore what you harmed plus extra in order to make it right. That's what we see in Exodus 22, 1-4, Numbers 5, 7, Proverbs 6, 30-31, and restitution can be a valuable life lesson in empathy by helping your child connect his harmful acts to the consequences felt by others. Restitution makes the child feel the harm he caused others by making him fix the harm, plus a little extra in order to fully restore the pain and aggravation he caused another. For example, if your teenager egged a car, as a practical joke, a powerful lesson in empathy would be to make the child do what the owner would have to do and wash the egg off the car and go beyond that and wash the whole car and apologize to the owner face to face in order to fully restore the harm done and feel the consequences of his bad behavior. I remember my mom saw her car get egged by kids in a car that drove by and saw the kid who threw the egg out the window, and she knew the kid. And my mom called the police, and she asked the police officer not to get the kid in any legal trouble, but if he could ask the kid to wash the egg off the car because egg destroys the paint on cars. And come to find out, they egged every car on the whole street. And the police officer loved the idea, and he made the kid wash every car on the whole street and apologize to all the owners. That kid was so sorry and embarrassed when he talked to my mom and didn't know that the egg can damage the paint on a car. And he learned a valuable lesson through this restitution that I'm sure he never forgot. I'm sure it was very impactful. I never egged another car ever again.
Yeah, I think that's a really important lesson for our kids because, sometimes kids can be a little rough on toys or, I don't know, something that they could do. Even as teenagers, they could take something from someone and break it or whatever. And it's important for us not to always rescue them. It's important for us to let them, like we just talked about the natural consequences in our previous podcast, but here is restoring what you've caused, right? And reconciling that relationship with the person that you've hurt And that's super important, because then that other person has lack of trust in you because you've damaged a property, or you've damaged something that was important to them. And, you restoring it at least helps that person to be forgiving. But, there's probably more to like working towards trusting one another again. But the point is really reconciling that relationship, when we do something that is hurting the other person, or even if it's by accident. Okay, you were throwing the baseball outside and somehow you threw it and you missed it, but you hit the window. You're going to be really sorry, but you want to be able to pay for that, right? Work towards paying for that. But if it's an intentional act, that is something that you as a parent should be like, okay, you are going to work hard to pay for that. And plus, you're going to either write a letter, you're going to tell them you're sorry face to face, what you did, because I think that teaches a valuable lesson of communicating your feelings to the person that you've hurt. It's also learning to ask for forgiveness. It's learning how to work hard to be able to restore that. There's so many lessons that you can learn from the restoration disciplinary methods.
You make some great points there, and I like how you brought in just the whole process of apologizing and forgiving and learning those lessons, and also using wisdom as a parent to determine, was this purposeful? Was this an accident? Was it an accident where they weren't being careful? So they're negligent. That might be different than just an innocent accident where they were being careful, but it was an accident. And so, there might be different levels of consequences with that. If it was a genuine, I was throwing the baseball and it just flew out of my hand the wrong way, you weren't doing anything negligent and it broke somebody's window, maybe a simple apology is all that's needed there, and their insurance is going to pay for it, or your insurance, or whatever. But if I was being negligent, I was fooling around, acting silly, and I broke the window, then that's different. Or I purposely was being destructive and broke the window. That's going to get more consequences. And, in all these, you may also want to add further restrictions on your child's freedom in addition to the restitution, but don't ever miss the opportunity to make your child restore the harm done from their misbehavior or negligence. And like you said, like with natural consequences, restitution can have some of the most impactful effects on improved character and help them develop empathy for those they harm by their actions, and teach them how to confront another person about something that they did that was wrong, and asking for forgiveness and apologizing and recognizing, I got to make this right, and I got to do more than make this right. I got to go beyond that and not just pay for the window, but do something extra, even if it's write a letter of apology, help them fix the window, just something extra besides just paying that, to restore fully the harm that was done.
Yeah. And, that's something that probably is ingrained in their heart and memory of like, I never want to do that again. Like, it's a humility to have to go in front of someone and say, I am really sorry. I was joking around and I intentionally broke your window, or I intentionally flattened your tire, or I intentionally took this from your yard, or whatever it is. And that's a huge humility of, I've got to go in front of this person and tell them I'm sorry. And now I've got to go and like work hard to restore this. It's humility. And I think that's all part of the process too, is God is working in our children's heart, to learn to restore, to learn to ask for forgiveness, to learn humility. So getting rid of pride, and also being respectful of others and elders and other people. So it's so many lessons that you can learn from that.
Yes, great points. And also connecting the consequences of one's actions, because as kids, they might not understand, like the kid that didn't understand that the eggs would take off the paint on the car, and not really fully comprehending that this person's going to have to take time out of their valuable day that they need to get a bunch of stuff done, and who knows what they have going on in their life, and now they're going to have to take the time to wash the car, and the child may not make those connections of how their actions really affect someone and can really hurt someone in a profound way that they may not realize. But when they have to actually, oh, this is what they would have had to do. And they can see that connection more fully, because now they're feeling it. It's like, oh wow, when I egg somebody's car, this is what they have to go through to actually clean it, and the effects that may happen. Or if the paint was damaged, now I got to go and actually pay for a new paint job. And without those lessons in restitution, they might not draw that connection and just think it's all fun and games and just a practical joke, and continue doing that behavior that's harmful to people.
Right.
And it's gonna, at some point, gonna really get them into some serious trouble if you don't teach the lesson while you can do so now in a way that they don't have serious consequences. Because I just love what my mom did, where she told the officer, I don't want to get him in trouble. I know this kid. Just make them wash the cars. That probably have more impact than taking them to juvenile court over something where the judge is not really going to necessarily do anything. Make them wash the cars, and the police officer like, that is a great idea. That's how they can really learn a lesson from this harmful behavior, and hopefully never do it again, and save them from further consequences in the future that may be more drastic, because if they continue to do that behavior.
Right. And sometimes they don't do it alone, right? It could be other influences. And maybe that's also another opportunity for them to realize that these influences are not good. Maybe I should be listening to my parents. And, because they don't want to go through that again. So, I mean, there's so much to learn about that, and so many things that we could teach, as the Lord tells us over and over in his word, that we are to continuously teach our children diligently, day in and day out, about the way and everything, as we're raising our children. So,
yeah. And, this is in the category of unique and thinking out of the box, because you might not even think of restitution necessarily. Like if you're in the moment and you're just angry and you're talking to the police officer about an egged car, you might just say, yeah, lock them up, and not even think about, wait a minute, maybe restitution is a better way to go. So we need to think out of the box as parents. And, there are other consequences and disciplinary methods that can be out of the box. And we want to kind of cover that real quick. Like, it makes me think of running laps. That there's a consequence that we saw another parent do, and it's like, well, that's a unique consequence to make a child run laps for some behavior that they did, or run up and down the stairs, run around the house several times. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've adopted that form of discipline because we're not at the spanking phase, which we talked about in a previous podcast. But
because she outgrew that, she's older now,
right? So but yeah, we do the running, and I think I remember when we first started it, it was like a bunch of giggles. Like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I can run 2 or 3 laps. That's not a big deal. I'm like, okay, 4. Oh, okay, sure, I can do that. I'm like, 5. Yeah, I can do that. 6. And then by the time you get to these numbers and it's not like we have like a massive lap in the backyard, but it's a lot to run around. And when we do that, then they don't like it. Eventually it's like, okay, you did this, time to run, time to go up and down the steps. And I think that teaches too, like, okay, don't do it again. And our daughter is so good at really changing quickly. Like, her heart changes because she's so upset. I feel like she's like, I'm offended that I'm in this situation. And she quickly turns. I mean, there might be some times where we have to do it several times, but she's pretty good at, okay, they're not going to let up. I need to pick up the pace and listen. And so I think that's something that we adopt.
Yeah, and it's a great way to refocus a child as well. Either run up the steps or run around the yard. Sometimes kids need exercise to refocus them. Maybe we just go outside and play for a moment and get some energy out. We often break up our homeschool with a little fun. I'll have a reading time with our daughter and then have a short time of playing hide and seek and tag afterwards. So we're often proactive with exercise, play, and going outside to burn off energy and prevent issues. But we also use it as a means of discipline for something she did wrong or hasn't done something as asked, or, she's just not focused and is acting silly during homeschool. And it's like, okay, we need a consequence. And we also need to burn off some excess energy, get the fidgets out. So go run a couple laps up and down the stairs, or a couple laps around the backyard, just like a coach would do to refocus a team that's not doing what they need to do. And it's like, go run a couple laps, and it can be an effective disciplinary technique, something to try sometimes to see if that works for you. Cause you have the dual effect of exercise just in and of itself can help refocus a child. Even if it's not a disciplinary thing, let's just take a break. We're not quite focused here. Let's just go out and play hide and seek for 5 minutes and then come back. And that can oftentimes just work wonders. But sometimes you need to make a point that this is more than just being fidgety. You are misbehaving here, and there needs to be a consequence. And so now we get into the consequence area, but we still get the benefit of exercise. Go run a few laps. Go run up and down the stairs a few times. And that can help refocus as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are great pieces of advice that we have as we continue in the disciplinary methods. And, we've been talking about this in a lot of our different podcasts. And so, I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to talk about this. And, it brings to my mind the restitution we had. It was Christmas time, and we had all this stuff in our cart because we were trying to get these cute little churches for our home, and it was just really cute. And I don't remember exactly which one it was, but something fell and it broke because we told our daughter to stop leaning forward on the cart. And so when she leaned forward, the whole thing kind of went to the side and it broke, and it was glass everywhere. And so she was so upset, and we were like, okay, you're going to have to pay for this. I remember that we were like, this is something that we're going to have to take care of because this belongs to the store, and we broke it. We were not responsible, and you weren't listening. And so now here are some consequences. We basically took it up front and told them about what happened. And so that's just a good example of making it right. We could have just, some people may have just kind of left it to the side in the aisle, but no, we wanted to make sure that people knew, the workers there, hey, this is what happened. It was an accident. And so our daughter was able to see the example of restitution there.
Yes, and it's such a valuable lesson, and it's part of thinking out of the box. So don't be afraid to think outside of the box or use different techniques you hear about from your friends or books or such, or from this podcast, to really teach our children how to connect wrongful behavior to bad consequences, and how when they're on God's path and they're on our path, great things happen and they get more responsibility. This is how the world works. This is how God's principles works. As he says that as we follow his ways, blessings happen. As we don't follow his ways, bad things happen. He created this world. He knows how it works. He knows the laws of the universe that he created. And if we get off his path, there's nothing but evil and bad things out there. And we need to draw those connections with our children under the safety of our home, where they don't have permanent consequences that will be life changing, but they do have consequences that they feel, so that they know, oh, I'm not going to do that again. And so those are some powerful lessons. Oh, when I break something, I got to pay for it, and even apologize, and even go above just paying the amount to replace it, but something extra. Man, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to be more careful. And so helping them draw that connection now under the safety of our home is invaluable.
Yeah, this is great. Great conversations around restitution. And this is something that we just have to teach and think outside the box. So again, we have a lot of the disciplinary methods available here on our podcast that you can check out, and I can list them in the description. But also, it's just really teaching and raising up children who know Jesus Christ. It's about teaching obedience. It's about teaching that there are consequences when we don't do things that are outside of the boundaries that we set. And it's also about being disciplined in what we ask them to do. So check out our podcast as we talk about some really key principle disciplinary methods We've talked a lot about the different techniques, but we have some more principles that we would like to discuss. So check that out. Until next time.
God bless.